All right, this is Sports for Real with Coach Hall. Doing a little natural sound today. Walked away without my microphone. I don't know what happened to it. It's not in the normal place that I put it. So I'm going to do it old school style. Plus, I like natural sound, natural light anyway. So let's roll with that today. Got a few minutes to come on and talk about high school athletics today, especially down here in Florida. Today, the basketball season gets started with exhibition rounds. You can play two preseason games here in Florida, and the guys are going to tip off tonight as well as the girls. Now, in times past, the women always started a week before the guys, but now I don't know why they pushed everything up, but they jumbled everything together, and you're going to have preseason games going on all week for girls and the boys. Also, this week, you have the kickoff of high school football playoffs in Florida, and they're going to be very interesting. Now, before they promoted that they were going to have this big super conference where they just start selecting teams based on their rankings in the state and put them in one big playoff bracket away from their normal brackets. But I haven't seen that bracket. I've seen all the other brackets. I glanced at them, and I don't see that super bracket. That's the thing I've been waiting to see down here, but it's not there. So I don't know if they plan to start that at some other time, but as of right now, it's not available. But what is available are the other brackets, which are 1A through 7A, plus you have an extra rural class, and they have this new thing. What do you mean wipe my camera? My cameras are fine. They have this new thing when they call it rural fit. Well, I don't know much about that, but based on the way things are going, you have a collection of what you have, the haves and the have-nots. You have teams that are collecting talent from all over the place, far away from their normal school zones, and they're couching that as a high school football team. I think there's a problem when you have high school teams that have rosters that read like college rosters. Are you really a high school football team, or are you some all-star academy that covers anybody that you can just happen to recruit? Whether you do it or not, somebody in your camp is doing some recruiting, and I don't think that's right. But I don't want to get off on that. I want to talk about neutral sites. Neutral sites have been a big thing in Florida for a while now, and the thing about these neutral sites is that they were created to keep teams from traveling long distances in the playoffs, particularly state championships. Down like most places, Florida typically has a north-south setup, and based on the way the state is designed, that makes solid sense. So the idea of the rule of the neutral sites came when you have the possibility of a team from Pensacola going against somebody from, say, Key West or Miami. If you're not aware, Key West to Pensacola is 840 miles. That is a very long ride to play a championship game. Now, I haven't seen Key West do much in football, but they've done well in baseball over the years, so they had to take some trips. But the longest championship game that I've seen was one of the first. Way back in 1980, Gonzales Tate, which is outside Pensacola, they were taking on Miami Columbus back in 1980, and they played on a Saturday afternoon, and Tate ended up winning that championship game. And I believe that is the only time. I don't know why that is. I had the same problem the other day. Maybe I can extract this and put some audio on it or something. Some people are telling me to wipe my camera and the camera is glitchy, but I really don't think there's an issue with the camera. But maybe my phone is just, I need to get another phone. But what I'm saying is, Tate went all the way, he hosted Miami Columbus, and like I said, you're looking at 800 miles from deep South Florida all the way to the far west. And unless you fly, there's no way to avoid that long trip, because you have to come all the way to Lake City or Jacksonville, then go down. You can't avoid it. Now, even on a boat, you're going to cut off maybe a couple hundred miles, but you're going to lose that in time. So you can't avoid that long trip. So what they did in the 70s, they would pick a site somewhere in the middle. Like I've seen Ocala Booster Stadium hosting championship games. They're hosting some other games in some other areas where these teams don't have to go these long distances. So this is the old style of thinking. But now you have the new folks. They want to be like everybody else. They want to do seedings now, and wherever you seed, that's just wherever you just happen to be, which opens the door for some very long trips for first round games. Maybe not so much for the bigger schools, because the large schools in Florida, the biggest ones, are generally around Orlando going south. They don't travel all over the state like the rural teams do. So let me give you an idea about some of the matchups we have here. You have a couple of teams here from Jacksonville. They're going to go out to Pensacola. More on that later because I got some interesting stuff you might want to hear about that. Both teams are going to go out to Pensacola, and Pensacola, Jacksonville is 360 miles. Then you have Holmes County and Union County. That's about 300 miles apart. Jay and Fort White, that's about 250. And generally you have the teams around Central Florida and South Florida. The most I've seen traveling in the first round is generally under 200 miles. Most of them are well under 200 miles. The closest I've seen, you have not Fort White, but Williston and Chiefland, who are county rivals. They're right down the street from each other, so that works out great travel-wise for both of them. But again, we're talking about neutral sites. The idea is to cut down the travel time for state championship games. But now with the seedings, it opens the door for long rides in the first round. And by far, the longest trip for a first round game this year in Florida comes in 1A, where you have Chipley coming all the way down to Pahokee for a first round game. Chipley and Pahokee is 474 miles apart for a first round game for two teams that probably won't get past the second round, whoever wins this game. And the problem is they're going to travel in this first round, and then in the championship game, they're going to go down to the villages for a neutral site game. Normally what happens in these neutral site games lately, you have two teams that will play, and they're right down the street from each other. For instance, last year, Daytona Mainland went to Tallahassee to play St. Augustine. St. Augustine and Tallahassee, you're looking at a little over 200. Daytona's an hour past that, so you're looking at 260. They could have met in Flagler Palm Coast, which is cut the distance in half, which is about 30 minutes, and went from there. But no. They want to play on neutral sites instead of playing on home fields. Now, granted, I understood that a lot of the fields back in the day weren't very good. So the team that was traveling long distances had to play on a bad surface. You get what you get. But now a lot of teams are getting that surface that they use in college and pro. So it's not much of an issue these days. But I just think it's ridiculous that a team like Mainland has to go to Tallahassee to play against St. Augustine. Now, granted, you don't know who's going to make it to the championship rounds, but normally that's the way it works out. And when you have Pahokee hosting Chipley, who has to go this long distance, and I can guarantee you that the championship round, the way it's set up, Hawthorne's probably going to be there again, and they're going to be playing somebody less than an hour and a half away. And that's just the way it's going to work out. And I think it's ridiculous. And I think the problem is the association, they're always trying to do things to appease the coaches. The coaches want this, the coaches want that because it's in their favor. But I can guarantee you, Chipley is going to be complaining about the trip that they have to take, whether they win this game or not. And the association is going to listen to them. So in 2 years, they're going to be making more changes. I have told you guys repeatedly that when you start comparing the Georgia Association with the Florida Association, there's no comparison. Georgia has a set way of doing it for the bigger rounds, where you take 4 seeds. You got 4 regions, 4 teams in each region go to the playoffs, and they all go in different directions. So there's no rematch unless you play yourself into a rematch. A couple of years in Florida, that's not the way they did it. No, you can beat a guy for a district championship, and 2 weeks after the season ends in the playoffs, you got to play that same guy again. If I'm the district champion, I should not have to see that runner-up unless we meet somewhere deep in the playoffs. I think the best way to do this is what it was when I was a kid. You won your district you go to the playoffs. Everybody else go play basketball, whatever else you're going to do. Because what's the point of putting all these runner-ups in there? They're trying to appease people with hurt feelings. They didn't win the district. They're a good football team. We should have went to the playoffs. Okay, fine. We'll take the runner-ups. Then when they took the runner-ups, they actually had it right. They had what they called the semi-state. So you had 16 districts. You take the district champion of one, he will host the runner-up of two, and vice versa. It was two different brackets. So if you're going to play the team that you beat in your district championship and you end up playing deep in the playoffs, you won't see that team into the semifinals. That actually happened a couple times. Neighboring schools, Panama City, Bay, and Rutherford actually did that. And the winner went on to the championship game to play against a team from the South. That made it purposeful when you had a North versus South matchup. But the way they're doing it now, this is stupid. If you're going to do anything, copy Georgia, and I know that's sacrilegious to a lot of people, but you take them 4 seeds, you send them in 4 different directions, and if you're good enough, you'll play your way into a rematch down the line, either in the semifinals or the championship game, which happens a lot of in Georgia. But at least I don't have to see that runner-up in my region until deep into the playoffs. And I think that's just the way it ought to be. But what does it all come down to? It all comes down to money. And people up in the association office are getting nice paychecks behind all these playoff gates, because you do get some really good matchups in the playoffs, whether it's round 3 or 4. But eventually, the neutral sites, you're going to end up with teams that are real close to each other, which makes the neutral sites irrelevant. But what you need to do is kind of like what they do in Texas. Now, they have the neutral sites, but they also, the officials from schools that are far apart, say like way out in El Paso, if they're going to play a team from Houston and around, they're not driving that long distance. They're going to fly or come up with an agreement where they'll meet somewhere else, like in the middle. They might meet in Dallas, or they might meet in Fort Worth somewhere. It doesn't matter. Those two teams are not going to travel that long distance from, say, Houston to El Paso. Those schools get together and they agree about where they're going to play, and they go from there. I think that would be something logical for the association to consider, so that a team like Chipley doesn't have to drive all the way down to Pahokee. If you're looking at Chipley, that's Washington County, you're talking about maybe 70 miles from Alabama going west, which is about 50 miles outside Pensacola. And Pahokee is in what county is that? Palm Beach County. You're looking at about another 60 miles to Miami. I already told you that Miami and Key West, you're looking at 700 miles. That is a very long trip. So when you look at Chipley and Pahokee, you tell me what sense does it make that these two teams should be playing for the championship in the first round. But that's just my take. I've been watching this stuff unfold for years and gathering how they usually change stuff every 2 years. I expect to see the same thing happen this year. But it's just something that people need to be aware of. So I got some interesting commentary about that you might just want to hear. It has something to do with historical contests that happened years ago. So until then, this has been Sports for Real. Been rapping about Florida High School Association, how the neutral sites have proven to be useless, and they need to do something about it. So also high school basketball is tipping off today, preseason games. Got the men and women playing preseason this week. Well, in the past, the girls would usually start a week before the guys, but you're not doing it that way either. So a lot of changes in the association, and it's just something that needs to be looked at. So that's just my take on that. But in the meantime, I'll come back up with some